welcome back to Mindful Conversations with Kay. This is Kelly.
And this is Kristi, and we are happy to be back and happy to be hanging out here today together and having some conversations today about how to incorporate some more mindfulness practices into your daily routines. And, as we were kind of talking about this, I was thinking a lot about when I used to be in the fitness business as a personal trainer. I think about a lot of my clients coming in and, wanting to make healthier choices in their life. Maybe their goal is weight loss or eating better, whatever it is. And, I was thinking about how people come in and they have this tendency to make these huge lofty goals and set these like almost unattainable goals for
Yeah.
themselves. I'm going to go to the gym 5 days a week and I'm going to eat, no sugar, and I'm going to do all this. And, these huge decisions, you see this a lot, at the start of the year when people make New Year's resolutions or anytime they're setting goals for themselves. Oftentimes they make these giant goals for themselves, and it's something that is kind of unattainable, when you try and set these huge goals. And I think it's the same way with mindfulness, right?
Absolutely. I think that with any new routine that you want, or a big change that you want to make, I think I always say start small and be consistent. And that's like the way that you can actually make bigger changes in your life rather than making these big, huge changes that you aren't really going to stick with.
Right.
So I think that comes with any routine change that you want to have. But especially with mindfulness, I feel like, and the wellness space, there's a lot of noise there right now, right? There's lots of different, you know, people giving tips on, how to live more mindfully, how to parent more mindfully, how to have more mindfulness in your classroom. And there's so many wonderful things out there. And it's so great that it's become such a part of the conversation, but it can feel really overwhelming as a parent, just a person in general, or as a teacher. If you decide, what, I do want to be a little bit more conscious and a little bit more intentional and mindful,
but how
it
do
can
I
be
even
hard to
start?
know where do we start? Yeah, that's it.
In our conversations previously, you mentioned something called habit stacking. Can you talk a little bit about that and what that looks
Yeah.
like, what that means?
Yes, I love this tip because we already have so many habits that we don't even like pay attention to anymore. Things that we just do automatically, like hopefully everybody gets in the car and puts their seatbelts on without thinking about it.
Yeah.
You get up and every morning and you have a routine that you just naturally do, right? So if you want to start a new habit, this habit stacking is about attaching a new habit to an old habit. So it's not about getting rid of the old habit, right? You don't want to get rid of putting your seatbelt on, but maybe you want to attach something else that's a healthy choice along with that. So you pair that together so that every time you naturally do the one that's already established, then you're adding the new one to it. And it's much easier to be consistent and to maintain it. And then before you know it, that new habit is established.
Yeah. I like that. I like that a lot. It makes sense. So, if you think about, you and I have talked a lot about like one of the best ways to practice mindfulness, just right out of the gates. One of the first things you can do, practice your deep breathing, right? So if we look at some practices that you as an adult can start, and what we want to do is talk about some habits that you as an adult can start with, and then you can bring your children, whether it's your own children or your students or whatever it is, you can bring them into it too with some other things. We'll talk about that a little bit later on, but I think let's start with the adult and what they can do. And again, this idea of deep breathing, I think is just a perfect way to just start right out of the gates practicing mindfulness. So if I think about like this habit stacking that you talk about, maybe the first thing in the morning for me, the first thing I do in the morning is make myself a cup of coffee, right? So I go downstairs and I get my coffee set up and my Keurig and the coffee is brewing, that would be the perfect opportunity, because I do that every morning, to just stop and remind myself, okay, now is the time I'm going to take 3 deep breaths, right? So I just pair that with that habit, right?
Yeah, yeah, that's a perfect example. I'm a tea drinker myself, so I get up and I put the kettle on. But while my kettle is boiling, I'm making my kids lunches. That's
There
that's
we go.
that's what I do while my kettle's boiling,
Yes.
because then I love to just give myself 15 minutes of time to drink my first cup of tea before I have to wake my kids up or anything in the morning. So
Yeah.
I always do my breath work right before I have my first cup of tea. So I boil my kettle, I let my tea steep while I'm making the lunches, and then as soon as I sit down with my cup of tea all made, I do my breath work, and then I enjoy my cup of tea in the morning before all the crazy chaos starts.
That's a perfect way to start your day, a perfect way to just kind of ease into things. And
Yeah,
by starting with those deep breaths, it's a great way to just sort of focus, calm the
yeah,
mind, and get
right.
ready for the day.
Ground
Yeah.
yourself for the day, but it doesn't have to be in the morning. It can really be anytime throughout your day, and multiple times. You can
Yes.
choose multiple places to, if breath work is going to be the practice that you want to start with.
Mhm.
And I really recommend choosing one thing to start with, right? We
Yeah.
talked about being small, to choosing something small and just being consistent. So you can take that, maybe you practice it with your coffee in the morning, and then maybe you find something in the afternoon that you always do. Maybe it's your car ride on the way home from work, or your car ride to pick the kids up from school. Whatever other habit you have in the afternoon, attach it to that as well, and then maybe something in the evening. So you're getting 3 opportunities
Yeah.
to practice that breath work.
It's interesting because I've been incorporating breath work at night, in bed, like as I'm getting
Mm.
ready to fall asleep. I have been falling asleep really well lately, and I really truly think it's because when I lay down, what I do is I just immediately tune into my breath, and
Yeah,
I'm not trying to manage it. I'm not trying to do anything with it. I just notice it. I'm like, and I even kind of repeat it in my head. I'm breathing in, I'm breathing out, right? And
yeah.
just and noticing, like, okay, where do I feel it in my body? Am I feeling it in my chest, or down in, a little lower into my belly, or whatever? And as I'm focusing on that breath, it just that slows the heart rate down. It lowers the blood. I mean, it does everything to just sort of ease you in. And so it's a great way to help you fall asleep.
It really is. It's
Mhm.
it's an excellent habit. We're going to get to the kids practices in a little bit, and that's one thing that I do with my daughter at night, at bedtime, is breath work, because she has
Yeah.
a little bit of a hard time falling asleep, and so that's a great time to practice it. I personally get very stressed in the car, so
Oh,
I
yeah.
pair it with my car rides. I am, like I talked about earlier with that seatbelt. As soon as I put my seatbelt on, I take those 3 deep breaths just before I even pull out of the driveway or out of my parking space, whatever, wherever I am, because I like to be on time places. So I find myself getting very tense in the car when I'm trying to get places, or if I'm driving somewhere new and I don't know where I'm going, I just tend to get a little anxious in the car. So I really have been intentional about pairing my breath work when I drive, and it's really helped me a lot.
Let's talk about driving there, because I think this is another place where you can really, outside of the breath work. I mean,
Yeah.
that's a big piece, but it's another place where you can really practice mindfulness. And driving is something I think a good lot of us do every day. I mean,
Yeah.
I know I drive somewhere every day, whether it's just, down the road, down the hill to pick the kids up from the bus or to the store, or wherever it is. So this is a great way to practice. So what are some other things that you can do in the car, that you can think of to practice mindfulness, mindful driving, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think just being intentional about the noise in the car,
Mm.
right? So often we get in the car and we just turn the car on, the radio just pops on,
Yeah.
or our phone connects and whatever's playing on our phone happens to play in the car. And we just kind of go about our drive, and we're rushing to get places, and we don't really pay attention to having a choice of what we want the noise level to be in the car. I mean, maybe it's choosing silence, right?
Mm,
Sometimes I
I
do
like
that.
that. Mhm.
I get in the car, and it's been a busy day, and I've had a lot of noise going on, whether I've been teaching classes or stuff going on at home with the kids. And sometimes I just want silence and I choose that, I turn everything off and I just enjoy the silence.
And I think sometimes we don't even realize how much noise is going on until we opt for silence. And then it's like, wow.
Oh, yes.
It
Mhm.
can really, really help to sort of calm that chatter and calm all that noise in your head, when you just opt for silence. I think that's really great. And I think also it allows you to kind of tune into your senses. So
Mhm.
let's say you're driving and you're choosing silence, in terms of the radio and the phone and everything else is off. It allows you to kind of just like, what other things do I hear? Maybe you have your window down, or maybe the window's up or whatever if it's cold, but you just notice, what other sounds do you hear? What are the sounds that the car is making? If you stop at a stoplight, can you hear anything going on outside? That's a really, really good mindfulness practice to stop and tune into the senses.
Yeah, I mean, and also tuning into your sensations that you're feeling in your body at that time, right? So often we're driving and we're tense, or
Yeah.
we're having discomfort maybe in our back, or if we're in the car for a while, just kind of noticing, like, and shifting and trying to find a more comfortable position, trying to relax your shoulders down.
Yeah.
We don't really tune into our physical body, and that's just
Right.
a mindfulness practice that can be really helpful for you to start to notice, like,
Yeah.
am I holding tension anywhere right now that I could release and
And
feel more comfortable?
have you ever noticed, like, sometimes I'll just sit there and stop and I'll go, okay, soften the forehead.
Yeah,
Because we like often are like, and you get this little crease in
yeah.
between your eyebrows or the lines on your forehead or whatever. So sometimes I'll just go, okay, relax your forehead, relax your jaw, like
My jaw
unhinge.
is my big, yeah,
Yeah.
the
You
jaw is my big one.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, so it's a great way. I think when you opt for silence and you allow yourself to just sort of tune into some of these other senses and tune into the physical body, you could even in your car bring some essential oils in. Maybe
mhm,
you just bring something like some lavender, eucalyptus, or whatever it is that makes you feel good. That would be a
yeah.
good place, and you could just sit and focus on that sense,
Yeah,
right?
I love that tip. Actually, my teenage daughter, when she got her license last year, she's one who really enjoys scents. Actually, she has a very strong sense of smell. So she's particular about the smells.
Yeah.
But she was like so excited when she got her car to get air fresheners,
Yeah.
and it was funny because I don't ever buy air fresheners. It's just not something that I ever really did for my car, but she's very into it, and she changes out the scents, and every time I get into her car, it's like a very nice experience
Yeah.
because it's just like, oh, it's just smells so lovely in here, and she's really enjoys, and that's an intentional thing that she does, and then she'll say, oh yeah, I got tired of that scent, I switched it out. And so it's
Love
definitely
it.
something that you could pay attention to, that it can bring you some
Yeah.
relaxation or joy or energy. Different smells bring on, different feelings and all
Yeah,
of that.
yeah,
So
yeah.
it's
No, that's great. Okay,
um,
so I love this. Okay, we've got habit stacking. We've got pairing our deep breathing with some habit that we do. We've got mindful driving. I love this. I love this idea of mindful driving. Just doing that. So, what is something else that we can incorporate in, just a small step to practice mindfulness in our
yeah,
lives?
I think a gratitude practice is another
Mm,
thing that's really huge.
yeah,
I mean, being mindful, so often we don't realize how focused we are on negative things that happen, or struggles that we might be having, or where we're lacking, or what didn't go right, or what we didn't get done on our to-do list, right? All those negative things tend to sort of come to the forefront all the time, just
mhm,
naturally. That's just the way our brains work.
yeah,
And so having a gratitude practice is a really nice way that we can start to become mindful about that inner dialogue that we're having with ourselves.
yeah,
And it doesn't have to take a long time. It doesn't have to be a big whole long thing.
right,
But just coming up with a few ways that you can um, recognize things that you're grateful for. So maybe it's journaling. Many people love to journal.
yeah,
Um, but even if you're not somebody who is an avid journaler, it's kind of that sometimes people are a little bit nervous about starting a journaling practice because it feels pressure, like I got
Yeah.
to sit down and I got to write, just set the timer for a minute and write down 3 things that you're grateful for. That's it. Doesn't have to be big, long, just make a list.
I love that. And, and I am not a journaler. I've always wanted to be a journaler.
Yeah.
And I've went out and I've purchased the cute journals. I've got these really fun, beautiful journals. I set it beside my bed. I'm like, I'm going to start journaling. And then I don't. So I like that idea of just, setting a timer and like, just there not being any pressure. And you can just write down just anything that comes to your mind it doesn't have to be a sentence. You can just make a list
Yeah.
of things that you're grateful for, all the things you're grateful for, or the things that happened that day that were fabulous. If you're doing it at the end of the day,
Yeah.
what made you smile, this particular day or whatever. So I like that idea of just not putting a lot of pressure on yourself, setting that timer for a short period of time and doing that practice.
Yeah. And I always too remind people that it doesn't have to be big things, lofty things that we're grateful for, right? It can be these small little nuances of like, you know what? Like I was thankful for that delicious lemonade that I had this afternoon, right? Like little tiny things. I'm thankful for like my cozy slippers because it was
Yeah.
cold out this morning, right? Whatever,
Right.
whatever it might be, can be those
Yeah.
little tiny things. It doesn't have to be, the big things that we think about when we talk about, being grateful. Like we always go to those big things, right? My family, like, and all of those things are wonderful. But
Sure.
I encourage people to find those little tiny things that you can start to recognize that, you're grateful for.
And it's amazing when you do that practice, it's just like, okay, this is going to be a silly example, but I gotta say this. So when we were looking for a new vehicle, right, we
Mm.
chose a particular type of vehicle, and it was weird when we went out and we were driving around the streets, like everywhere I went, I'm like, oh yeah, there's one. Oh yeah, there's one. It's like when you're looking for
Yes.
it, you see it everywhere. So I
Mhm.
think gratitude practice and that sort of thing, it's the same thing. You're creating these new neural pathways in your mind where
Mhm.
it's like, if that's what I'm focusing on, then I'm going to see
Yeah.
more of that. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. It was not a silly example at all. It's an excellent example. It happens to me all the time.
Yeah. Right.
Always. Every time I get a new car, I'm like, wait, there's a million of these on the road.
I know.
So true.
I didn't realize everybody had the same car as me. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's
And
great.
I want to throw out another idea.
Yeah.
This kind of came to me last year. I was trying to be more positive and do that verbally in front of my kids. I was trying
Oh, so
to
good.
show them that I was having a gratitude practice for myself and just for little things. And so I challenged myself that I was not only going to have this gratitude practice, but I was going to at least once a day show this verbally to my kids, not by having a big conversation about it, but just by by modeling it, right?
Yeah.
By just modeling it and saying things out loud. So I had a bracelet that I would wear, and I would start out in the morning with my bracelet on my left hand, and I would move it over to my right hand when I accomplished that goal of showing this gratitude in front of my children. And so I would know by the time I get to the end of my day, like, uh-oh, my bracelet is still on the left hand. That means I haven't modeled this skill for my kids today. I better find a way to do it before the end of the evening. So
That
it
is
kind of held me
genius.
accountable.
I love that. And as a parent, you can do that as a teacher, because as
Mhm.
a teacher to model that for your students and, wanting to bring more mindfulness and positivity into your classroom, what a perfect thing for a teacher to do too, and make it, whether it's
Yeah.
a bracelet or a ring or something, some
Yeah.
visual representation so that, like I'm modeling this for my children, for my
Mhm.
students, whatever
Yeah.
it is. I love that idea. That's wonderful. Really, really good. Yeah.
Yeah.
So speaking of kids, so we've got, all right, we've got our deep breathing, we've got mindful driving, and we've got our gratitude practice. So these are great things, I think, to start with and easy things that we can start with to sort of be the example as the adult.
Mm.
So let's talk about how to bring the kids into this. How do we
Yeah.
use these same practices with kids?
Yeah, I'd love to kind of break it apart a little bit by age group so that it helps people to kind
Smart.
of know, different practices for different ages, maybe breath work that you would practice with toddlers might not work as well for teens. Some
Right.
of them do. So some of them
Sure.
are go across the ages, but
Mhm.
let's just talk about breath work first and think about those little ones, the toddlers and preschoolers, right? I know we both love teaching this this age group, but this is the belly buddy breathing. This is what I practice with my daughter at night. What I was talking about. This is my 7-year old. She's a little bit older, but we started this when she was much younger, when she was a toddler. And
Mhm.
you can just have them lay down and get a little stuffed animal and place it on their belly. And then I tell them to take a nice deep breath and try to rock their little friend on their belly, let their belly go up and down, and they can rock their little friend on their belly to sleep. And that really helps them to physically feel what it feels like to take that full deep belly breath, right? Sometimes
Yes.
it's hard to explain to kids how to take that full breath. So
Mhm.
by bringing their attention to their belly
Mhm.
with a stuffed animal, that really helps them to practice that.
I love that. I love that. And I've used that in my like the mommy and me classes that I've done, like with kiddos as little as, 18 months, 2 years old.
Yeah.
They love that idea of having that little friend. And I've used it with, kids that are a little older as well. Let's talk about like school age kids. I know that one of the things I've done with kiddos that are a little bit older is balloon breathing.
Mm,
Right. So you can even like take and a couple ways you can do this, but one thing I like to do is I have them pretend they've got a balloon here. They're going to blow it up. So they take a deep breath and then they blow into the balloon. And I know this is a podcast, and so if you're not watching it on YouTube, you're listening to this. But what I'm doing with my hands is I'm making a little balloon shape in my hands, blowing into my hands, and then I'm expanding my hands to make it look like the balloon is blowing up. Right. So
mm,
you blow this balloon up and you keep blowing, and it encourages them to blow a little, to breathe a little
yeah.
slower, breathe a little deeper, and you can even go so far as breathing any sort of worry that they might have into that balloon, right? So every time they breathe out, they think about breathing out whatever worry that is. And sometimes we even let that balloon go. We say, okay, your balloon is blown up. Now just let it go, right? Let it float out the
Mm.
door. And so you let those worries go, right? Great one to use for kids that are a little bit older.
Yeah, I love that practice. And I love it for so many reasons. I mean, obviously, it gets them to do that big, deep breath and that nice, long, slow exhale, right, to fill up
Mm,
that balloon.
mm,
But this age group is so wonderful to really tune into their imagination. So you can have fun with it and be like, what color balloon do you want to have
mm, yeah.
today? Right. And sometimes I don't do balloons. Sometimes I'll do bubble gum, right? And
Oh,
I'll get
yeah.
silly and say
Mhm.
like, oh, are you allowed to chew bubble gum in school? And they're all like, no, we can't, we're not allowed. Oh, it's okay. Don't tell anybody we're going to chew some bubble gum today. And then they all pick what flavor they want to have. And I go around and
Yeah,
I pass out my pretend bubble gum and they have their flavors. So you can have some fun with it to really engage them in that practice. And they
100%.
they really enjoy it.
100%, 100%. Yeah. So as we get a little older, we've got teens, tweens and teens, and
Mm,
I think probably the buddy breathing and the balloon breathing may not they may kind of turn their noses up at that. So what's
yeah.
something you can do with these older kiddos to work on breath?
I love doing the line drawing meditation
Yeah,
or
for sure.
breathing. So this is just giving each child a blank piece of paper and a pencil,
Yep.
and then having them, if they feel comfortable, they can close their eyes, but they don't have to. They're just going to put their pencil point down on the paper, and they're going to take an inhale and draw a line on their paper as they inhale. And then when they go to exhale, they're going to switch directions and draw a line in a different way. And then continue to do that in any pattern or way that they want, and they'll end up making just some design on their paper by the time they're done, and they can even then later add to it and color it in, or add
Yeah.
some words of positive affirmations to it. You can take it even to the next level, but it just helps them to really slow their breathing down as they guide that pencil along the paper.
And I think too, with these older kids, you could even go so far as to say, let's say you're anxious about something, you're angry, you're upset, what would those lines look like? And you could experiment with that. And when your breathing is shallow, when you're breathing rapidly, what do those lines look like? And then they could do
Yeah.
that on one paper, and then on the next paper you can say, okay, let's slow it down, let's practice that deep breathing.
Yeah.
And then even comparing those two drawings to take a look at how those would look different based on how they're breathing, right?
I love that. Yeah. It's
Yeah.
really, really a great
Yeah.
tip.
Yeah, great way to practice breath work with kids. And so let's talk about, we did kind of mindful driving. And so what are some things we could do to kind of bring our kids into this practice in the car with
Yeah,
us?
so we can think about mindful car rides with the kids, or if you're a teacher and you're thinking about incorporating some of these practices, these are great for mindful walks right from down the hallway,
Oh,
whether you're
yeah.
going, taking your class to the lunchroom or to their specials or walking to the bus. So these tips that we're going to give in this next section can all be used during a car ride or be used on your walk to
Walks.
school in the morning. If you don't drive to school. The kids can even use these on bus rides once they learn how to do it.
Sure.
So the first one that I love is playing I Spy,
Oh, yeah.
right? Tuning into our sight and seeing what we can notice. I talk about all the time with the kids that when we drive the same place over and over, or when we walk down that same hallway, we don't really pay attention to all those details that are around us. So when we play a little game of I Spy, or tuning in, looking for certain specific colors, we tend to notice a whole bunch of things that we don't normally see on our day-to-day basis.
I was with a group of kids one time. I was teaching, I can't even remember where, but I remember doing a find the rainbow with them. So I said, okay, we're not going to talk. We're just going to, as we're walking, when we're going to walk kind of slow, and I want you to find something from every color in the rainbow. Right. And so then they had to go around, they'd look, and then they had to remember that. So it was a good way to sort of practice that focus and that mindful concentration as they're walking along, and just choosing these colors. And you could do that, as you're walking down the hall, or wherever, or you could do this in the car ride. You can choose a color and say, I want you to see if you can find the color blue, count how many blue things you see, or something like that.
Right. Yeah. I've done it where I give them a specific color and then I ask them to remember the one thing they found. And then later on, we may have time to talk about, and then we can see how many different things that the kids found. Most of the time, they're going to think like, oh, everybody's going to see the same thing. But we find that when we're all looking, we all have different perspectives. We all notice different things. So it's a really fun thing for them to see, like, oh, I didn't even see that, but I saw this. And so it's a neat way.
Yeah, for sure. And if you're in the car, if you're driving in the car, you can opt for silence, of course, in the car with the kids, but maybe letting the kids be real intentional about what music they're selecting, or letting your older kids sort of play DJ or something, and figure out what songs are gonna elicit some calmness, or some energy, if you need energy, or whatever. Be interesting to see what the kids choose then.
Yes.
Yeah.
We were doing this a lot in the car rides back in September. My 7-year-old was having a really hard time transitioning back to full day school after being, virtual learning for so long last year. And so mornings were pretty tough. And so driving to school, like, she would get pretty anxious on the way to school. And though I know she loves music, she's just one of those kids that really, it just helps her. So that's what we did. We would choose a song, and sometimes we'd even pick it the night before. We'd be like, okay, what song are we gonna pick tomorrow? And sometimes in the morning she would pick it, like, oh, I'm feeling this way, I'm feeling kind of tired. I need a song that's like, gonna like energize us. So we think about a song that's a little bit more pick me up, or maybe she'd want a more quiet song one morning, like, oh, like, or maybe I'd request a little more quiet song for that morning. But it was a great way for her and I to kind of, be a little bit mindful in the morning to lessen her anxiety, because she was really kind of distracting herself and paying attention to the music. So we weren't getting that build up as we drove down the street, to the closer and closer to the school, because she was focused on the music, and it was really setting a nice tone for the day for both of us.
I love that. Yeah, I was just thinking as you were talking about that. Yeah, you gave her something else to focus on,
Yeah.
because it would be easy to sit there and talk about like, okay, well, I know you're upset, I know you're anxious, I know you're scared or whatever. And so, let's make sure we're, and if you continue to sit there and talk about it, then she's going to be focusing on that. But what you did is you just gave her something else to focus on. I love that.
Yeah,
That's great.
because and we obviously practice breath work all the time, and
Sure.
she uses it herself all the time, but it just that wasn't working in that moment, when she was so anxious. I could tell her over and over, keep taking those deep breaths, keep taking the deep breaths, but we needed something else to
Mhm.
to
A
focus
distraction.
on, and the
Yeah.
music was a great thing for
Love
for
that.
that.
So that's great. So we've talked a little bit about, kind of some breathing techniques, and then, mindfulness in driving or walking down the halls or whatever it is. So one of the things we talked about for us as adults is this gratitude practice. So bringing this into to our kids' lives, how do we bring them into this, and what are some things we can do with them?
Yeah, I think again, it's about being consistent, right? And making it part of their routine.
Yeah.
So maybe you want to choose meal times to talk about what was something great that happened
Right.
that day. That's usually a time that the family gathers, not always,
Yeah.
but you try to consistently at some point try to gather around the table. So maybe that's a time that you just go around and have everybody share one thing that they were enjoyed that day, or that went well for them, or
It's
something they're
interesting too. I
grateful
know
for.
we do that I do that with my boys and my husband. We do that at meal times quite often. And
Mhm.
they're they're 13, almost 14 and 12, my boys. And so,
Mhm.
they sometimes they roll their eyes at me when I say, okay, what was the best thing that happened today
Right.
best thing that happened during your day? And they kind of roll like, oh, mom, but they'll do it. And it's interesting what kind of conversations that sparks. Sometimes it sparks
Mm.
this whole nother conversation. And so I think what a perfect way to connect as a family, when you're practicing gratitude. And and as teacher, I know I would do that in my preschool classroom. Like,
Mm.
what was the best thing about your day today? What was the
Yeah.
best thing that happened today? And so practicing that gratitude in the classroom. Maybe it's in your opening circle, you talk about the best
Mhm.
thing that happened yesterday, or maybe it's at the end of the day, in closing, waiting for pickup time, or
Yeah.
whatever.
Or even like something you're looking forward to. It doesn't even have to have
Mm,
happened yet. What's one
yeah.
thing you're looking forward to when you go home from school today that you're going to do? And get them thinking, get them excited and thinking about the positive things that
Mm,
are coming. And I know that we do it too at mealtime. Sometimes I'll switch it up if my kids are kind of like, whatever, they don't want to. I'll say like, what's one funny thing that happened today?
oh yeah.
What was like the silliest thing that happened, or what's one thing that surprised you today? And just
Mm,
kind of get the conversation going. And you're right, it opens up like a whole conversation instead of just saying to your kids like, how was your day, and did you have a good day, like it sort of is
because they
more
grunt
of a
at you,
conversation.
right? They grunt at when you
Yeah,
say,
yeah,
I know that my
yeah,
boys get in the car when I pick them up from the bus. I'm like, how's your day? Fine, boring.
yeah,
I get that every time. But
yep,
when you give them something else, when you start it a different way,
yes,
so they can get away from these one word answers and grunts.
totally.
Yep, yep. I love this. Well, I think these are all wonderful practices, and I think maybe easy ways to start incorporating more mindfulness into your day and into your routines. I think these are
Yeah,
great. Yeah,
yeah, I think if everybody just keeps in mind to start small,
yeah.
and right, a minute or two each day, consistently every day is better than 15, 20 minutes or half an hour once a week, right?
Hmm.
So start small and be consistent is the biggest tip. So pick one thing and just be consistent for a while with it. And when that becomes a habit, then add another one in.
Yeah, for sure. Great stuff. I love this as always. I love our conversations, and
Yes.
I love the things that I learned from you, and that I think are just super valuable for us. So I just appreciate all of your insight, Kelly, and I
Oh,
look
right
forward
back at
to.
you. It's always great chatting about these tips, and
Yeah,
hearing different perspectives and what you
yeah,
do. And all these helpful things. It's always great to share. And so
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. So hopefully, those of you that are listening, I hope you got some good insight here and got some good tips and everything. And we look forward to our next conversation together.
yeah, have a great week, everyone. See you back here next week.
Bye.
Bye-bye.